Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody. I have a fantastic follow-up from, was it last week or 2 weeks ago when we talked about chiggers?
Yeah.
I got them. Here, got them down my back, I got them around my ankle, I got them around my waistband.
Oh, no.
And I wasn't really out in the wild all that much. I was, we had a field trip on Saturday for our naturalist class, and I stepped off the trail a couple of times, and they're so sneaky because you don't feel them when they first bite. And the next day I was kind of doing a little bit of this, and man, I've got them on. I don't know if you can see them.
Wow. Yes.
Yeah, and it's wherever is tight against your body. I had a around my shirt, and yeah, it was. But I guess the part that's most important to you guys is that I had some Bactine, good old Bactine. They I had a bottle, and it's long expired, but I sprayed some of that on, and it took away the itch. So that helped then with the scratching too. And hopefully, that'll continue, because I haven't been as miserable as I first thought I was going to be, because a lot of times chiggers are just endless with the itching and the discomfort. But I wanted to share that good news before we get started.
Oh, sorry.
So yeah, be careful. So prevention is always better. I always tend to shy away from bug sprays, but the ones with DEET really are supposed to repel these things. So keep that in mind, because it seems like we're having a big year for those pesky things. Looks like just about everybody's entered. I'll keep an eye here. We've got a few more folks signed up this week, which is great. And we are exploring some other ways of doing this program that would make it easier for you all to join every week. I can't speak to the technology side because I don't speak technology, but we are working on a couple of other different formats where we can make it more accessible and easier for everybody to join in. So with that, why don't we get started? We'll get our screen shared here, I think. Okay. All right, let's see what we can find here.
Oh.
Someday we'll go through what all these pictures mean. There's a lot of good stories here. Just haven't had time to get to. Oh, we'll move on. So last week, if you had a chance to read the column, we talked about gray tree frogs. One of my personal favorites. They're kind of chubby. Always like the chubby critters. They have good appetites, which I like too. And they are just everywhere these days. The article talked about the tree frog, this one here on the left, and I actually found that he was sitting on a box in a dumpster. And when you think about what frogs like, which is insects, and when you think about dumpsters, which generally have insects all around them, if there's tree frogs in the area, sometimes they migrate towards those areas. It's good initially because they get a lot to eat, but I always wonder how many tree frogs end up getting dumped with the dumpster. It kind of makes me worry sometimes. I've seen them around garbage cans and things too. I hope our folks that do our trash pickup are a little mindful of who might be around. But they are just, for one thing, they're fairly distinctive when you look at them. Now, quick glance, you might think, oh, it's a toad, because they are kind of lumpy. They can have a somewhat brownish or bumpy brownish look to them, but in general lighting conditions, they should have either a grayish or a greenish cast to them. The big giveaway, though, that they are tree frogs is these toe pads. This is what lets them hang out in trees. They can grip onto bark, and they can grip onto leaves. I tell you, when they are on a piece of bark, and it's kind of funny, I don't have any pictures of tree frogs on bark because they camouflage so well there. They're really hard to see. Where you find them is stuck on things in dumpsters. This is on the wall at Hickory Knolls. These two pictures on the left are actually the same frog. I took these two pictures here after a program, some of you I think were at it a few weeks ago. It's called Nature After Dark. And we talked about singing insects. Of course, I had to weave in some cicada stuff there, and bats and lightning bugs and moths. We didn't talk about things like tree frogs. But after everyone had left, I was cleaning up, getting ready to go home, and who comes hopping along but a gray tree frog. But you notice it's not gray, it's green. They do change color, and this can lend to some confusion. Amphibians in general, color isn't always the best way to identify them because it can change. Even the ones that don't really truly change colors, they can appear very light, they can appear very dark. We found a toad today during nature camp that was black, just black, looked like a piece of coal. Why was it black? I don't know. There were actually two of them in that area, so it might have something to do with the substrate or how moist it was or how dry they were. But most amphibians' colors can change regardless of the color changes that can occur within their skin cells. But then some truly do change in big ways, and gray tree frogs are one of them. They can be gray, they can be green, they can even be, oops, what happened in this picture here? This is Bob and Kathy, this is your picture, but I don't know why it's not showing up right. This is a gray tree frog. It's looking somewhat green, and it's in the birdhouse behind Hickory Knolls. Those of you who have been to Hickory, you know that we have a bluebird trail. It's maintained by a very dedicated volunteer named Michael Swanson. He's been out there for over 20 years. And Bob and Kathy Andrini were out walking. That was on Sunday, I believe, that you guys texted me. And said, look what's in the birdhouse. Mike was doing his, gosh, he's out there almost every week checking on, he maintains extensive records of the number of nests and the number of eggs and the number of successful hatches and the number of successful fledglings. And so we got years and years of data. I don't think any of his data, though, includes tree frogs. So this was kind of a neat thing that occurred, and I apologize for the quality of this photo. I don't know why it didn't display properly, but these guys can turn up, and we do seem to be having really a banner year for gray tree frogs. Thanks to your tip, with the camp kids today, we went and we looked in a different, we were walking by a different birdhouse, and we saw not one but two tree frogs. So yeah, I don't know, that picture on the left there, there's well, hold on, let me see, maybe if I go to the next screen. Yeah, here we go. So all right, so this is Bob and Kathy, this is your photo, and this one on the right, I apologize for, I'm not sure what happened, but there was one tree frog in one birdhouse on Sunday, and then yesterday and today, there were two tree frogs in one birdhouse. Yeah, for some reason that's not showing up right. But you can see them here. I guess, tree frogs are, like most amphibians, they are very prone to drying out. And they have a kind of a extra special sense that lets them find microclimates that are humid and welcoming for the needs that they have. And apparently birdhouses, there must be just the right amount of humidity in there, and they are also a little bit shaded from any sunshine. We did have a little bit of rain the last few days, so maybe the boxes, they have not been in the PVC birdhouses. They've only been in the wooden ones. So the wood maybe absorbs some moisture, creates just the right sort of climate. Speaking of climate and tree frogs, I've also found them in, big protein tanks that have, that would supply propane for a building. There's a little cap on the top of that where the propane is filled. There's valves and stuff up there. Well, tree frogs will hang out inside there too, because that cap seals in moisture and it shields them from sunlight. I found them underneath the eaves of houses. And I'm sure they're on trees too, true to their name. It's just like I said, they're really, really hard to spot. Let's go on here to the next slide. So they're called gray tree frogs, but as I mentioned, they're one of the types of amphibians that can truly change color. These two here are both gray tree frogs too, but they have gone really beyond just a touch of green to the true lime green color. Now this is something, it has a little bit to do with temperature. It also has to do with the frog's level of agitation or excitement. Generally when they're warmer and more excited, they'll be greener, and when they're cooler and less excited, they'll be gray. I like this picture. This was from my friend Miss Margaret, who used to work at Red Oak Nature Center. She found this tree frog during one of their night hikes. It shows really well the inside, the flash color that these frogs have on the inside of their back legs. Generally speaking, flash colors usually either serve as a means of warning other members of their species, or the flash color can serve as a surprise to predators. And you read, research is kind of divided on the exact meanings of it. But with the tree frogs, when they hop, sometimes it's visible. It's certainly visible when they're stuck on the glass of a window, but I doubt they will have evolved that cool color just so you can see it when they're hanging out on your window. But this picture shows really well what that color, that flash color, looks like. Now, when people see these gray tree frogs, and here in Kane County, this is the tree frog that we have. We do not have this tree frog here. This is a true green tree frog. These are present in Illinois. They live much farther south from us. Gray tree frogs, this picture was down in the Shawnee. I think this was maybe a mayapple in the summertime. But green tree frogs, you see their skin is smoother. They don't have those bumps. If they've got markings, and they don't all have markings, but if they do, they're kind of yellowish in color. They've got this really prominent white stripe along the side. And these guys don't have any of that. They're bumpy. They don't have the yellowish markings. They tend to have a light colored spot. It's kind of hard to see underneath the eye here and underneath the eye here. But a gray tree frog that's green does not make it a green tree frog. Completely different species. However, gray tree frogs do have gray tree frogs come in two different species, and they are absolutely identical from the outside. Their difference is on the inside and the number of chromosomes that they have. You would have to dissect them and do genetic analyses to determine which species is which. Most of us aren't going to get that technical, especially you don't want to hurt your cute little froggy friends when you're out looking at them. Here in Kane County, we have never found anything other than Cope's gray tree frog. So if you're somewhere in Kane County and you find a tree frog, it's going to be a copse. However, in other places in northern Illinois, they do have what's called the eastern tree frog. Now, there is a way you can tell. This is an eastern. There's a picture of an eastern tree frog that I took at my friend Bonnie's. She lives out in Newark, Illinois. And the reason I know that it's an eastern gray tree frog is because I heard this. That's not my recording, but that's the sound that I heard. It almost sounds like a red-bellied woodpecker. And that is the call of the eastern gray tree frog. Now, the copse has a different sound. It's a harsher sound. To me, they sound kind of angry when they make this noise. They're not. That's the males trying to attract the female. So they probably are trying to sound, suave and debonair, but what they sound. Hear that difference in the tone? That's a good one. Even though they look identical from the outside, that difference becomes apparent when they inflate that throat sac and they call to each other. So let's listen to it one more time. Here's the eastern. And, I said it sounds like a red-bellied woodpecker. These guys call at night, typically. They can sometimes call in the daytime. But nighttime, again, getting back to that issue of moisture and needing to have the right sort of conditions so they don't dry out. Nighttime is always going to be more humid and there's not going to be any sun, so it's going to be safer for them to call. And that's when a lot of their courting takes place. So when you think you're hearing a red-bellied woodpecker calling, but it's dark out, chances are you're in eastern gray tree frog territory. Let's give this another listen. So a little bit higher pitch, a little more melodic, maybe you could say, sweeter sounding. And then here we've got our blaring coat. All right, got it? Both species occur in northern Illinois, but here in King County, you find a tree frog, even if it's not gray, it is a Pope's gray tree frog. So this next few set of slides, this just kind of occurred to me this week and I thought, gosh, I love it when this happens. I took this picture on Saturday during our King County Certified Naturalist field trip. This is goldenrod and this is a beetle. And people, especially some of the gardeners in the group, they looked at that and they said, gosh, that looks like a cucumber beetle. And I thought, what in the world would a cucumber beetle be looking at goldenrod? And this wasn't the only one we saw. We saw a lot of different beetles that look just like this on goldenrod leaves. And I thought, I wonder, here's a little closer up view of it. I wonder if that's more than a coincidence that we are seeing these beetles on this plant, only these beetles on only these plants. And so when I got home on Saturday, I looked it up and sure enough, there's such a thing as a goldenrod leaf beetle. And I love it when the name describes what it is. I also was curious because in the springtime, and some of you I know that you've taught our school programs, and in the springtime we always do one called bug biographies, and we're out, it's usually May when we're out with the kids, and we'll be looking at goldenrod and we'll be seeing these little, they look like caterpillars, but if you remember from a few weeks ago, remember caterpillars have prolegs, and they have maybe 3 or 4 sets of prolegs in the back. Well, this one is a lot different arrangement here. It's got the prominent, because it's an insect, it's going to have 6 legs. So here's the 6 legs. And these are metallic, like an indigo blue. Turns out they're not caterpillars at all, but they are the larvae for the goldenrod leaf beetle. So you see goldenrod leaves and they've got a beetle on them. Chances are really good it's going to be a goldenrod leaf beetle. So now this is the start of a little trend here and a little ID trick I want to explain a little bit farther. So here, this next one here, this is dogbane. And dogbane is actually a plant. It's got milky sap. You can sometimes find monarch caterpillars on dogbane. Well, this time of year, you often will see beetles that look a little bit like a Japanese beetle. But Japanese beetles, you know, they've got those white spots around the edge of the wing. And these, I tell you, these things are gorgeous. They look like little drops of molten metal, shiny precious metal sitting on the dogbane leaf. Now, if you can see what I'm doing here, dogbane leaf with a beetle on it. It's a dogbane leaf beetle. Kid you not, that's its name. So there is a really strong time, you know, because we get a lot of requests for insect ID here, and many insects are tied into the life their life is tied into that of a plant, and they usually can't survive without it. Now, monarch, you know, the monarch name doesn't give away that it's tied to milkweed, but the milkweed, there's a milkweed leaf beetle, there's another the red milkweed beetle, and then there's the large and the small milkweed bugs. So sometimes when you're looking at an insect and you don't know what it is, pay attention to where it is, and sometimes that can be a clue as to what it is. I'll give you one more example. We found this. This was at another KCCN, King County Certified Naturalist field trip. A couple of weeks ago, I saw them for the first time, and then I saw them again with our nature camp kids. This is a basswood tree. And you'll notice that some of the leaves are curiously rolled up. In fact, when you look at them closer, they look kind of like a burrito. Now, that's no accident. Something has done this, and they've done it on purpose. It's a basswood, and the leaf is rolled inside. If we were to open up one of these basswood leaf burritos, this is what we would find. This is a basswood leaf roller. It turns out that these little caterpillars actually turn into moths. The moth was kind of nondescript. I haven't been able to find, well, actually you can Google it and find a picture. I don't like to share other people's pictures without giving them credit. And sometimes you have to contact them and ask permission. But there is a basswood leaf roller moth too that these guys will develop into, but they kind of tuck themselves inside of here. They eat the leaves, they grow up, they pupate, and then they fly away once they turn into moths. And they make more basswood leaf rollers. But again, looking at the plant, and in this case too, the plant and the behavior was going to give us the name. So it's just a little ID trick that can sometimes help. That's, if somebody calls, that's one of the first questions I'll ask is, well, do you have any idea of the plant that it was on? Because of the way the insect and the plant lives are sometimes reliant on each other. Anyway, that's this week's insect ID trick. Now, last week we talked about an event that we participated in. St. Charles and the King County Forest Preserve District helped out at an event that the folks down at Red Oak Nature Center developed. It was called the Rusty Rodeo. And it's actually, this was the second year that we did it, and it's an event that was designed to kind of help out some of our local crayfish. Now, before we get into the rusty crayfish, I just wanted to show you what we've got here in terms of native species. There's actually 7 different species of crayfish that live here in King County. The northern crayfish is probably our most common species. That's what you see oftentimes in the Fox River and in Pearson Creek. This white river crayfish, this is kind of a bland brown coloration, but they can sometimes be bright red. But they'll always have this dark bar here on the tail. They've got really long, thin claws. I see these crayfish living over at Delnor Woods Pond. I've seen them there. Paper shell or the Cali crayfish has quite a speckled nature to it. Don't see a lot of them. Same with the northern Clearwater crayfish. Sometimes they're in diverse streams. Pearson Creek, I've seen them in Pearson Creek. Then these 3 over here on the right are not usually found in water, but you might come across them on trails near water because they're burrowing crayfish. If you've ever seen those, the holes, they look about the size of chipmunk holes usually, but they've got little piles of dirt around them. Those are called crayfish chimneys, and they are the work of these burrowing crayfish. I think we talked about these guys a few weeks ago when I was on the trail of those, what turned out to be periodical cicadas in my mom's yard. But here in King County, we have devil crayfish and prairie crayfish. We're also supposed to have the digger crayfish, but I've never found one of them. Devil and prairie are 2 more common species that live, they dig down in moist ground until they hit the water table, and then they have a little burrow then that fills up with water, and they kind of sit down in that burrow, and then they come out and they forage at night usually, or on rainy days you can find them as well. But these guys they're all native to the area. They're what's to be expected, and they're the ones that kind of fit nicely into our local ecology. However, we have had another crayfish, and it's not a recent introduction. These guys have been here for several decades now. This is the rusty crayfish. And oftentimes when we talk about introduced species, we're talking about something that's come from Europe or from Asia. It's evolved in a climate or with other plants and animals that are very different from what we have around here. Well, the rusty crayfish is actually native to the Ohio River basin, or Ohio River watershed. So really not that far away, a 6-hour drive or so, but still it was not found in our drainages. And when it came here through the introduction, it was a crayfish that was bred and sold in bait shops. It's not sold anymore. It's not allowed. Bait shops aren't allowed to carry the species because it came with some not so great traits. It's a little aggressive, more aggressive than our native species. It grows more quickly. It grows faster than our native species. When it feeds, it shreds plant life, and it sort of destroys the plants for other creatures. In Wisconsin, they've had a huge problem with rusty crayfish, but they've gone after it, and they've done a good job of getting things back under control. But Wisconsin, they get so many tourism dollars from sport fishing, and when rusty crayfish are introduced into an environment, say in a lake where there's lots of aquatic plants where bass and other game fish like to hide, you put rusty crayfish in there and they shred all the plants, and then the game fish don't have a place to hide anymore, and game fish might try to eat the rusties, but these guys fight back. We've tried feeding them to our Blandings turtles at Hickory Knolls, and unless we snip the claws off, the turtles will spit them out because the crayfish will chop at them with their pinchers, and turtles will go back to eating their kibbles instead of eating what would otherwise be a natural part of their diet, which would be crayfish. So the rusty crayfish, if you ever find yourself streamside and you're wondering if you're looking at a native crayfish or a rusty, you look on the side of the carapace, and they have these rusty red spots, one on each side. It looks, for all the world, like somebody dipped their fingers in barn paint and then went and picked up the crayfish and left a mark. That red color kind of comes through on some of the joint areas as well. They've got orange and black tips on the end of their claws, which some of our other crayfish do too. What you really want to look for, though, is this this spot right here. Now, this next slide is going to show you, this is the other side of this crayfish. This is something, it's not unique to rusties, but it gives you an idea of how large of a family they can produce. This is called being in berry. This is a female crayfish, and when she lays her eggs, they come out up here, and then she kind of glues them underneath her tail. And the eggs develop there, and then they hatch, and the little ones actually hang on to mom for a few days until they molt their skin again and are able to then drop off and live on their own. But rusty crayfish, not only are they more aggressive and they shred their food as they eat it, but they also reproduce at a higher rate than our native crayfish. So for that reason, Red Oak coordinated this effort called the Rusty Rodeo. This year we found, oh gosh, I think it was a few hundred of these crayfish, and we removed them from the Fox River and from the little creek that's at Glenwood Park in Batavia. And then we froze them, and we're feeding them to the turtles in our nature center. So it's kind of a neat event. We're hoping to grow it in the future. I'd like to hold one up at Fearson Creek Park because we find rusties there. Now there is, as I always like to say, there's always a story behind the story. This is a picture of a snake that we found at Fearson Creek Park, home of lots of rusty crayfish. And this is a snake we found at Fearson Creek Fen, which is right next to Fearson Creek Park. And we've got all these crayfish living in right at the mouth of Fearson Creek, where it dumps into the Fox River. A lot of rusties living there. Well, we were holding a summer camp session there a few years ago, and one of our campers looked over and said, look, Miss Pam, there's a garter snake on a rock. And I looked at it and I thought, my gosh, that's not a garter snake. The garter snakes will have a yellow stripe down their back. And this snake didn't have any stripes down its back. It did, however, have some stripes on its belly, which garter snakes don't have. You can kind of see the stripes here on this individual. These are two different snakes from two different years. But these are queen snakes. And this is where, so, having an introduced species that's beating up on our native species, that's not a great thing. But I think, now this is just a thought, but the queen snake it's a specialized species. It specializes in feeding on freshly molted crayfish. And so here we have Fearson Creek with a lot of rusties that are always growing and molting. And when they first shed their skin, they're very soft. So that's the time to eat them. Whether you're a person or a snake, that's the best time to eat a crayfish. Anyway, these guys will feed on them. And we are starting to find queen snakes. When we found this queen snake, it was the first record of a queen snake in Kane County in over 30 years. So even though we've got this introduced species problem that we're trying to get ahead of, we're doing what we can, but nature's doing what it can too. And crayfish, the queenfish are helping us out by eating some of those crayfish. All right, so, what's a good-natured hour without talking about cicadas? I took this picture the other day. For some reason, I didn't have my lip balm with me, so I had to use my keys for size. But this hole, it's not quite a ½ an inch around. I would say maybe close to a centimeter in size. this was in the soil outside of my office here in downtown St. Charles. So I got a stick and I wanted to see how far down the hole went. And I had my suspicions of what made this hole, and you might too. It was a cicada emergence hole, and I'm starting to see these all over the place. I'm sure they're in places where they're not so obvious, maybe, you know, in a lawn or under mulch, but when you're walking around, just keep your eye open. It's kind of a neat thing because then once you find the hole, then you walk around and you see if you can find the cast skin of that cicada that's come up from that hole. I'm not going to say how long I spent looking for the cast skin of this particular cicada. I will say that I didn't find it, but it's kind of one of the reasons why I can't just, you know, I'd taken the puppy out, actually, is what I was doing out there, and he laid down while he was waiting for me to finish doing what I was doing, since he was done what he had to do. But I also wanted to show, this is, you know how they say in the news, if, you know, for sensitive viewers, you might want to, you know, avert your eyes. I found this the other day. It's a great example of how nothing goes to waste in nature. This is alongside of a sidewalk. This is a recently emerged cicada. It had crawled up out of the ground. It had shed its skin one more time, but then something happened and it fell down and it did not survive. But look at the feast that the ants are having. I've got another angle on it here. You can tell that it's a freshly emerged cicada because of the bright green colors here. As they age, as their soft, recently emerged tissues start to dry out, they darken up, they become like a dark army green or dark forest green. But these ants were just having a field day here. They even with that famous ant teamwork, they weren't able to move it off of the sidewalk, but they could tear off pieces and cart those back to the ant colony, wherever it might have been. But anyway, not every cicada survives, unfortunately, but this particular ant colony was having a big bonus day in terms of fresh protein up from the ground. So this was just a kind of a gee whiz thing too. I love being able, like I said, I'm working nature camp this week, and I love when you just kind of have an aha moment. And that occurred today. We were out fort building with our little Pathfinders campers. They're, I think, kindergarten through second grade. And I looked over and I saw this cottonwood leaf leaning against a tree. And I thought, my gosh, it looks like an imperial moth, our moths from last week. And is that just me? You know, is that just a coincidence? So when I got back to the office, I did a little research, and I found that sure enough, adult imperial moths will remain motionless much of the time, and they mimic the dead yellow leaves that are common in forests at the time the moths emerge. So this article talked about the different plant species here in this area. It's cottonwoods, but it could also be redbuds, because redbud leaves, there's a few of those that are dropping right now that are kind of yellowish too. But it was just kind of a cool aha thing. This was the research that was taken from. And then the Department of Entomology at the University of Florida, they've got a lot of really helpful articles. And that was the source for that confirmation of what we were seeing. Let's take a look at it one more time. Look at the colors of the moth and the markings and the speckles. I mean, isn't that just incredible? This is the result of not just, you know, dumb luck, but year after year, when a moth is born with markings that mimic something in its surrounding, it's going to be able to camouflage better. Those that don't have markings that camouflage well usually don't survive. So year after year, then those favorable traits get passed on, and over time you end up with a species that looks remarkably like, in this case, a dead cottonwood leaf. I just thought that was really cool, and it's kind of nice. We weren't, as the counselors, we weren't really, we were supervising, but we didn't have to be as, we weren't building our own forts today, so it gave me a little bit of time to look around, and you just never know what you're going to see when you start paying attention. Now, got one more thing, and this, those of you who tuned in a few weeks ago, you might remember we received a picture of a moth called a black witch moth. And that was these pictures, the picture here on the left, that was taken in Elburn, Illinois, on June 26th. A gentleman named August Arno took several pictures of this black witch moth. Black witch moths, they are not an Illinois species. They're not even a Midwest species. They are a southern species and a Central and South America species. But they do come up here from time to time. As we talked about a few weeks ago, winds that blow strongly, sometimes from the south to the north. Sometimes a black witch will get caught in one of those winds, or sometimes if they fly up high enough, they kind of get sucked along in a jet stream. But they do show up here from time to time. The first time I ever saw one, I was working at Red Oak, and we were getting ready to do a bat program, and black witch moths, they're as big as my palm. They are as big as my hand. I mean, they've got like a 6-inch wingspan. It's really incredible. The males are very dark. This is a female. The one that August found was a female. But I was getting ready to do this bat program at Red Oak, and everybody thought that I had put a bat up on the support beam in the picnic shelter. It was a male black witch moth that had moved in. So I didn't know what it was at the time, and that was kind of pre-internet, so it took me a little bit of time to figure out what it was. But once I found out that it had flown from who knows where, Florida, or even farther south than that, it was really kind of exciting. I found another one at Leroy Oaks in 2017, and then haven't seen or heard anything about black witch moths since then until August sent this photo on June 26th. Well, flash forward to last week, and we get an email. Let's see if I can pull it up here and read it to you. Hello, I live in northeastern Wisconsin. I found dead on the grass this morning. I live near woods and a grassland / field. I found what I believe to be a black witch moth. Its size is huge and it matches what I've read on the internet, but I'm not familiar enough with them to feel confident in my assessment, as they are not normally found this far north. Can someone there help identify this? I took several photos I can send. Well, needless to say, I followed up. And this is the moth that Susanna sent from Hobart, Wisconsin. Now, it's a female as well. And just look at the battered wings. I mean, this girl has really lived quite a life. And I emailed Susanna back, and we actually had quite a nice email conversation. Turns out she's a very dedicated walker and a viewer of nature. She's very observant and had a lot of curiosity too, which always leads to a lot of discoveries. Well, I said, I wonder, I sent her this photo, and I said, I wonder if there's any, and of course, we can't prove this, but the fact that these moths are fairly rare in this region, for us to have one here at the end of June, and then Hobart, Wisconsin isn't too far over the Wisconsin line. It's in northeastern Wisconsin. Here's another moth that shows up. Same species, much, much worse shape. Is there any connection here? Could it possibly be that our Elburn moth is the same one as the Hobart moth? I don't know. It just kind of adds to the sense of wonder that nature gives us, and it makes you think, if it made it as far as Illinois, it actually made it as far as Illinois in pretty good shape. That last 90 miles or so into Wisconsin looked like they were kind of difficult. If this is indeed the same moth, could have run into some hardships there. But moths, and I remember when we found the 2017 moth, I corresponded with some people at the Field Museum. And I said, the fact that we find these from time to time, could it be that we would ever get a sustainable population here, that they would breed and we could have black witch moths here? And they said, well, not for a long time. Our climate, even though it's changing, it's going to be a long time before it's a Caribbean sort of climate, which is what these moths, down there, they can be found year round. Around here, and it's very occasional that they're able to make this journey this far north. So the thinking for now is that the black witch moths are just going to be occasional visitors when the conditions are right. Anyway, just kind of a cool gee whiz thing, and another sign that you just, when you see, Susanna, when she first saw this, she actually thought it was a piece of trash that she was going to pick up, and then she looked at it again and thought, no, you know what? That's a moth, a huge moth, and one, it turned out, it made an incredible journey. So with that, I'm going to stop the screen share, and I'm going to turn it over to you. How's your weeks been? Anybody have any exciting finds they'd like to share? Any questions that we have about what we talked about this evening? Anybody?
I have a question, totally unrelated. This is Betty.
Yeah, hey, Betty.
Not really related to tonight, but we went to the Hebron sunflower maze. And,
yeah.
And it's wonderful. I highly recommend it for everybody. And we noticed that the sunflowers were all facing east. And we wondered why. You have any insights into that?
Well, I would imagine it maybe has to do with the sun and gathering as many rays as possible at that early morning sunshine. But I don't really have insight into why it's west or east instead of west. Mm-hmm. It's funny you say that. And I have to ask you guys, is that a trend now? Are sunflowers kind of a thing? Because I know, I've heard about the sunflower mazes. I didn't know that there was one up in Hebron. But I go to my mom's house every week in Wheaton, and the DuPage Fairgrounds people planted some, I think there's 3 different beds of sunflowers along Manchester Road. And then I had another person who reads the Good Natured column tell me that he and his wife were going out to see the sunflowers at Shabana State Park because they're going to be cut down soon. They grow, I know the IDNR will grow patches of sunflowers and other grains to encourage game birds for a hunting season. But it just seems like everybody's talking about sunflowers these days. And I'm usually the last to know if there's something trendy going on.
Yeah, well, by us, this is Von Bergrens, but there was an article in the Herald that, features your article And they had all different, LaSalle County, I think Sangamon County, a bunch of counties that have the sunflower mazes. And
Mazes?
then
Uh-huh.
at the end of August, I don't know what they do with the sunflowers. I'd like to know. There'll be a hemp maze.
You say hemp?
Hemp. H-E-M-P.
That's what I thought you said.
Yep.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Probably a different crowd.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I actually took some pictures of sunflowers today, Betty. I'm going to look and see, because you know, the Hickory Knolls is right next to the garden plots out at James O'Brien Park, and I don't know if I can. Yeah, it never really works well to share a screen to a screen, but these things are over 8 feet tall already, and I know the gardeners. They're a lot of times they now there's a couple different gardens. There's one big plot, and I think those people cut them and use them, you know, in flower arrangements. But other people use them then as bird food. And some people will leave some in the garden plots, and some will cut them down and put them in their yards to feed the seed-eating birds that they have. But it seems like a lot of people are talking about sunflowers these days. So, which is, it's time they had their time in the sun. And Betty, if I can find out anything else about why they face that way, I'll let you know.
I think the tendency is to follow.
What was that, Kate?
Sorry, I think they do somewhat follow the sun, because
Follow the sun?
just at random I've had various types of sunflowers, and it does somewhat follow the sun.
Well, and so when I took that picture today, the sunflowers were facing south, and this was at noon. So I don't know, Betty, were you in the sunflower maze in the morning?
Let's see. We went there maybe noon or 1.
Okay.
And I had thought, of course, that, you know, it would follow the sun, but
Yeah, but they were all,
didn't seem like that was.
they were facing it. I'll see if I can find an answer to that. See if
Yeah, one other thing, out in the field, there was a constant, and we probably should have asked when we were there, but we didn't, a constant boom, and, you know, or intermittent boom. It wasn't constant. And we wondered if that was the way to scare away the birds from the corn crop.
Might be. I've heard,
Yeah.
I've heard of towns hiring people to do that. I haven't heard of it recently, though. It used to be, you know, when we used to have lots of crows, although crow populations are going up again. And then I think grackles, too, sometimes people don't want them hanging around. So that, if they were trying to protect the seeds.
Yeah. It's a lovely spot. They have a market and a petting zoo and a butterfly house. And so we got sweet corn and nice vegetables.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll
Great
keep that
spot.
in mind. Yep. I
So
see.
thank you for all your wisdom tonight. It's always so good, Pam. Always.
It's funny, you know, you just every week there's just, and somebody asked me the other day, they said, you know, you always talk about bugs. What are you going to talk about in the winter? There's more than enough things to talk about every
Right.
season. You know, right now it happens to be bug season, but there's always plenty of wonder out there
Mhm.
to say. I see there's a note here from Sarah Kimber. She recommends permethrin spray to repel chiggers. Getting back to our first topic, and I feel well about not itching while we've been talking, but permethrin spray, and that's helpful for both chiggers and ticks. So thanks for that tip, Sarah. Appreciate that. Anybody else?
Pam, somewhere along the line, could you talk about fox snakes?
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, I've got some fairly recent pictures. Fox snakes are a local species. Maybe I'll put that on the agenda for next week. That's probably, that and water snakes are the two snake species that everybody always wants to know what they are, because they look a little bit like rattle. They don't look like garters. I think that's the main thing. Everybody
Right.
knows a garter snake with the yellow stripe down the back, but a fox snake has a blotchy brown pattern, and they have this habit of, when they're agitated, they shake their tail. And when that tail is against, say, dry grass or leaves,
Yeah.
it sounds like a rattle. And Kay, are you friends with Linda Boland?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, Linda had a great fox snake escapade a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I can throw some of her pictures in too, but
And
fox snakes.
I've seen them a number of times out here in Elburn.
Okay, yeah, and they're a great species to have around. People, there's snakes have a PR problem. There's no doubt, but when you compare them to, say, like cute little chipmunks and cute little squirrels, cute little chipmunks and cute little squirrels are loaded with fleas, so they can transfer those to your pets. They gnaw on things. They can get into your attic. They can get into your basement. They chew things up. Insurance doesn't cover rodent damage, so when that
Right.
tunnels underneath your patio and everything collapses, it's up to you to get it fixed. Fox snakes can help you control all of those things, plus mice and voles. They don't chew on anything. They don't smell. And yet people will oftentimes go after them with a shovel and then ask questions later. So yeah, we'll talk more about fox snakes next week, because there's some neat things
Thank you.
we can share about that.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Hey, Pam.
Hey,
Um,
Kelly.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you guys? Hey, Greg.
Hey, Pam.
We don't have a question, but we just want to say that we saw 3 stag beetles when we were at Morton Arboretum this weekend.
You saw what, stag beetles?
3.
Nice. Well, I was hoping to have a little stag beetle. I did go back and I found a couple of female stag beetles. Where were you at? Where did you find yours at?
We were at the Morton Arboretum and we were doing all the trails that are there. And they
Okay.
were just hanging out, frozen, and they were like, each one we saw was in the middle of the path. None of them were moving, but all of them were very much alive. But they were just like, just stopped. They were just frozen. And
Were they like that? Did they rear up? Just for,
No, they were just hanging out, just like, I don't know.
I don't, because the ones I have at my house have been doing, I thought, oh gosh, have they died? And no, they're just, because then they do pinch. I got pinched again. Were you, do you know if there was, were they like in wood chips or?
Yeah, the trails that we were on were wood chips. And they were, all 3 of them that we saw were smaller than the one that you had on camera.
Okay. Did they have smaller mandibles too?
I think
Yeah,
so.
all of them seem to, yeah.
Okay, those might have been females then. And I really haven't been able to find whether males come out first and then, set up their territories and then the females come in. I still haven't been able to get find anything that explains that part of their life cycle. But I do have a female that I'm hoping will produce some eggs and some larvae, and I was hoping to have an update on that this week, but right now they're still, I make a little concoction of diluted honey and put some mashed banana in it, and they feed on that. So they're still eating, but I don't know if they're laying any eggs. So maybe we'll have an update on that next week. I'll put a question mark for that. Cool finds though. Thanks for sharing. Now, next week, a little sneak preview of what this week's article is going to be about. I wrote about great black wasps, and it's something to keep an eye out for. And again, so, you know, snakes don't have a great reputation. Wasps don't either, but wasps are, by and large, extremely beneficial. They get a bad rap because of the yellow jackets, most of which we have around here are German yellow jackets. Well, I shouldn't say that. We have Eastern yellow jackets too, but yellow jackets, and we're seeing more and more. I just saw a couple at a bird bath the other day. So those, there's eusocial insect that that means it lives in a big group in the ground, and they defend that burrow, and they defend their queen, and they sting, and they can sting multiple times. But most of the wasps that we have in this area are not a type of social insect. They are a solitary wasp, and they don't have that drive to defend a large colony, and they really don't want to sting. They will if they're threatened, but we're going to explore next week a little bit more, not just the great black wasp, but the golden digger wasp and some of the other large wasps that we're seeing this time of year. So tune in for that, and we'll add fox snakes to that, and see if we can get a stag beetle update, and then who knows what else. Let's see.
All right.
I will add, because he just came in here and plopped down on my foot. I'm so proud. Here's tech support puppy. His first
Oh,
of daycare was yesterday. He spends most of his time here with me in the office, but this week in camp and everything, I don't quite have the time to, you know, he can't come to camp with me, so he's actually zonked out here. But I've never sent a dog to daycare before, and I didn't know. I've got a picture for the refrigerator now. So Boker says hi, and we'll see y'all next week.
good.
Everybody have
Thank
a
you.
great
Good night.
rest of your week.
Thanks so much, Pam.
Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.